Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 5090 O-Level Biology, June 2014, paper 1-2, first video discussing the first 21 questions. Question 1. What are found in plant cells? Question 1. What are found in plant cells but not in animal cells? No, cell wall is not found in animal cells and chloroplast is not found in animal cells. So these two are not found in animal cells. And so it says what are found in plant cells but not in animal cells. So this would be the answer would be 3 and 4. Then question 2. Question 2 is which statement is always correct when oxygen is diffusing out of a plant cell? The concentration of oxygen is higher inside the cell then. So whenever there is diffusion, you have to understand they are asking you if you know the definition of diffusion. If you know the definition of diffusion, then only you know that it has to be from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So the concentration is, if you're talking about oxygen, which statement is always correct when oxygen is diffusing out of a plant cell? So I mean these were all wrong because this is about carbon dioxide. And then when it is diffusing out of a plant cell, the concentration of oxygen is higher outside the cell. Now this was also wrong. Then coming to question number 3, the diagram represents the passage of water molecules and glucose molecules. Please understand the question, water molecules and glucose molecules across a partially permeable cell membrane. This is the partially permeable membrane that they have drawn. Now you can see these have been colored. This is the water molecules. The circles are the water molecules. I've just colored them and shown you the difference between them. So the water molecules are yellow and the green molecules are glucose. Now it says which arrow indicates osmosis. Now first of all, in osmosis there's always the movement of water molecules. So if you look at the yellow molecules are more on this side and they're less on that side. These are the yellow molecules less on this side. So they're only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So more water molecules on this side. So this is actually more free water molecules. And this also tells you another thing. You can see there is less of the solute in it. So less of the glucose on this side. There's only 4 glucose here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 glucose here. And on this side, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 glucose molecules. So the water molecules move from where they are in a higher, we say higher water potential. So less solute means higher water potential, means more free water molecules. So please understand, because this could be a very complex question coming in your exam very soon on the 26th of July. So more free water molecules. So that is why the answer was A. Now B is about glucose molecules. C is the other way around. And then D is of course again glucose molecules. So you had to be very careful in picking up which one was correct. And that's why the answer was A. And let's come to question number 4. The diagram represents the lock and key mechanism of an enzyme that works best at pH 7. Enzyme looks like an E, and this is the substrate. Now, which shows the enzymes and its substrate at pH 13? Now, we look at imagine the graph of pH. pH graph is something like this. And this is the optimum works best at pH. So this would be 7. And something would here maybe 5, and then 9, or maybe even 13 will be somewhere here. So they've all got denatured. But the enzyme shape will remain the same. Sorry, the enzyme will change shape. The enzyme has been denatured. So the enzyme will be denatured. So the enzyme shape will change. Now you see in this diagram, the enzyme shape has changed in C and D. But the substrate must remain the same. The substrate must remain the same because nothing happens to the substrate. Just like in an enzyme, in a reaction in which this enzyme, say, is amylase. And what fits into amylase is starch. So nothing's going to happen to the starch. The starch is going to remain the same. What will happen to the enzyme? The enzyme will change its shape. The enzyme was like this. Now it is like this. This is the normal enzyme. This is the abnormal enzyme. So enzyme has been denatured, but this will remain the same. The starch molecule will remain the same. So this was an easy question. I don't think it was a very difficult question. Then coming on to question number 5, what are the signs of magnesium deficiency and nitrogen deficiency in leaves of plants? Purple spots on leaves, reduced growth of roots, reduced growth with loss of leaf color, yellowing of leaves between the veins. So they've given you then two options. One is magnesium deficiency and then the other is nitrogen deficiency. So magnesium deficiency would be yellowing of the leaves. So that was very clear that you remembered that. And 3 was the reduced growth with loss of color. So reduced growth with loss of leaf color would be, of course, nitrogen deficiency. Why? Because nitrates are required for amino acids, and amino acids are required for protein. So you have to always remember nitrates, amino acid. This is how you're going to remember it in the exam. Amino acid to protein, and protein results is needed for growth, So that is why this was the answer. Coming to question number 6, when carbon dioxide is being used in photosynthesis, what is its diffusion pathway in a leaf after entering a stoma? So now let's do a diagram. This is the cuticle, this is the upper epidermis, and then of course we've got the palisade mesophyll, and then we've got the spongy mesophyll, and then of course please remember you've got the guard cells, and then you've got the lower epidermis. Now it says when carbon dioxide being used in photosynthesis, so that means it is being less inside the leaf. So carbon dioxide outside in the air is going to diffuse in. There's no membrane it's crossing. So it has to just enter it. So that had to be 5, which is the intercellular spaces. And then it would enter where? It would enter one of the cell walls, either the cell wall here or the cell wall of the palisade mesophyll. So first it would be the intercellular airspace, then it would be the cell wall, and then it would be the cell membrane, which is just immediately below the cell wall, and then it would be the cytoplasm, and then it would be the chloroplast membrane. So first of all, the intercellular spaces, then the cell wall, then the cell membrane, then the cytoplasm, and then it would enter the chloroplast because that is where the pigment is present inside the chloroplast where photosynthesis is taking place. So please understand how this is the pathway. Then coming on to question number 7. Now the diagram shows the arrangement of the tissues of a leaf as seen in cross section under the microscope. So we've seen upper epidermis, palisade, mesophyll, xylem, phloem. Now here, if you remember, I just drew it a little while ago, is the cells, the spongy mesophyll cells with the air spaces. So it couldn't have been A or B or C, it had to be D because this is where you can see the air spaces. They've taken a section through it. They've taken a transverse section through it. So the transverse section, of course, would show you the section and you're looking at it from the top. So this is how you're going to really imagine how it is going to look at it when we want to take a section of it. So XY would be through the spongy mesophyll cells, and the section would be taken from that. And you'll have to see the air spaces. So this is what it would look like. Question number 8. Which combination of mineral and vitamin is required for strong bones? That's very obvious. Strong bones means we need calcium, and we need calcium to be deposited as calcium phosphate, and we need vitamin D for the absorption of calcium. So basically it was calcium and vitamin D which is required for the number 1 strengthening of the bones and number 2 for the absorption of calcium in your intestines. so that if you drink milk and the calcium is absorbed, it has to have in the presence of vitamin D. Then coming on to question number 9, the graph can be used to estimate the daily energy requirements of women depending on their mass and level of activity. So daily energy requirement in kilojoules and mass in kg. Now, what is the estimated daily energy requirement of a woman of mass 75 kg? So we've got 75 here. Let's just circle that so we remember it, we don't get confused. Mass 75 kg who has a moderate level of activity. So this is the moderate level of activity. So how will we calculate that? So we have to just draw a line and we have to see that. When you figure this out, how much was this? The moderate activity of a 70-year-old, 75-year-old woman would be here in between here and here. So this would be the limit. And this is nearly 7750 to 8750 is roughly the amount which would be needed for moderate activity. And 10, the diagram shows two different human teeth, P and Q, drawn from the front. What are the functions of this teeth? This is definitely the incisor, this is the molar or the premolar. So incisors are cutting and premolars are grinding. So you must be able to differentiate between the four different shapes, the incisors, canine, premolars, and the molars. And premolars and molars are basically for grinding, and the incisors and canine are for the cutting. Question 11. The diagram shows a section through the stem of a dicot plant. Which tissue transports sugars to the stem? Basically, they want you to know whether you know which is the phloem or not. And the phloem, as you all remember, in the stem is on the outside. So the phloem is on the outside and this is a stem. So in the root, of course, it is different, but in the stem it is different. So you have to really understand that they were asking about a stem, and the phloem is, the xylem is going to be inside. So C is going to be xylem. So this would be the xylem. The xylem is going to be inside. So A was, of course, the outer epidermis. D is inside the cells of the cortex. So all these are wrong. Only B was the answer. Then coming on to question number 12. Now this has again been mentioned in the exam report. The exam report is a little ambiguous about it, but it says the understanding of transpiration as being powered by the sun could be improved. The commonest error was the belief that water absorption in the roots causes transpiration. No, well, that is not the case. Is basically what is the main source of the energy that causes water to rise up a plant stem, and that is why is that, main source of energy that causes water to rise up the stem is light absorbed by the chlorophyll, because that is going to use up the water. The water and carbon dioxide are going to react to form glucose and oxygen. Photosynthesis is going to take place. But photosynthesis cannot take place without the light energy. They asked you energy. The point was energy, which you had to understand. So what is the main source of energy that causes water to rise up a plant stem? The source of energy would, of course, you see here, the others were all wrong. Why were the others wrong? Difference in water potential? No, there's no energy situation. Heat from the sun? No, heat is not required. We need the light from the sun. This is light energy to chemical energy. And here, respiration of sugars made in photosynthesis, well, that releases energy. So there was not energy, it was not, this was sort of just a very, very confusing question. What is the main source of energy? And that would be light energy absorbed by the chlorophyll, because in photosynthesis, light energy is converted to chemical energy. So the water is going to combine with carbon dioxide and we're going to form, and that, of course, water then creates all that suction force and all that, which is going to happen. So this was question 12. 13. Which sequence shows the shortest route taken of blood traveling from a leg to an arm in the human body? Now for that we need to know the circulation, leg. So in vena cava, heart, pulmonary artery, lungs back to the heart, pulmonary vein, and then the aorta, and then of course an artery which arises from the aorta, which could be called the arm artery or the brachial artery or any name which you don't have to know actually. So from the leg, first it has to go through the vena cava back to the heart, then the heart, then again pulmonary artery, lungs, pulmonary vein, heart, and then of course aorta, and an artery arising from the aorta would be anything from any name which we can give to it. Then coming to question 14, now this is again being discussed in the exam report. It says close reading of the stem of the question was required to determine the correct answer. The vessel shown was a vein. D was a popular answer. Some confusion exists over the name of the vessels carrying blood from the heart to the lungs, with candidates erroneously thinking it is the pulmonary vein. So again, this was a difficult question. So difficult questions are always discussed in the exam report, and you can be expecting them to come again in some form or the other. So the diagram shows a section through part of a vein. What could be the first organ found in the direction 1 and 2? Now, if this is a vein, now this I've done, of course, in previous questions as well. If this is a vein, you have to understand is that what is the direction of the flow of blood in a vein. In a vein, it's going to be something like this. Why? Because the valves close and prevents backflow. The valves close and prevent backflow. So this is what you have to understand. What was it? In which direction was it? Now, if the veins, this is a vein. It says it's a vein. So you have to understand what would be here and what would be here. So the direction has to be from here to here. So you need to write all this. So one, it said heart. Oh, sorry. One, it said heart. That's the other way around. One here was the heart, and this was the brain. Well, that makes sense. Heart, aorta. You see, the heart, there are the, it has to be, you have to understand is that one, they've said the heart, and it's a vein, and then it's the brain. So the blood is flowing in a vein from the brain to the heart. Yes, this would be the superior vena cava. This would be the superior vena cava. Okay, now let's write the other ones and see why they are wrong. How can there be a vein which connects the liver to the intestine? Well, that's not possible. So this was wrong. Why was this wrong? Because the blood does not flow in a vein from the heart to the kidney. It flows in an artery from the heart to the kidney. So this was, it said this was a vein. So there is no vein which connects the heart to the kidney. So this was wrong again. And then of course the last one is, does it connect heart to the lungs? So the lungs is going to be written here. Now heart to the lungs is pulmonary artery. It's not the pulmonary vein. So this is how you have to understand is, number one, you have to understand the veins, and then you have to know the connections between the different parts, and that is why A was correct. Then coming on to question number 15. Now this is a very favorite question. I just discussed this in class today as well. The graph shows the pressure changes in the left atrium and the left ventricle while the heart is beating. Where does the atrioventricular valve close? You see, I'm just going to discuss a graph with you, and then of course you will understand atrioventricular valve close. This is now the blood filling into the atria, coming into the atria, and that's why you see this increased pressure here of the left atrium. Let me just draw this and color this so that you all understand this. So left atrium is this. So when the atrium, this is the atrial systole or the atrial contraction, when the pressure rises, and now as soon as it reaches here, now when you can see here, this is the left ventricle. So if you look at the left ventricle now, what is going to happen? The left ventricle is, pressure is rising at this point. Now this pressure is rising because the ventricular contraction has started. So the point B is where the ventricle is contracting and the atrioventricular valves close. Why the atrioventricular valve closes? Because what you have to understand is that the atrioventricular valves has to close, because when it starts to contract, the blood is going to go back into the atrium. We don't want that to happen. So this valve must close so that no blood goes back into the atrium. So if the atrioventricular valves are closed, only then this contraction occurs, and then the blood is going to go into the aorta, and these valves are going to open up the aortic valves or the semilunar valves at the base of the aorta, and the aorta curves like this. So the answer was B. I'm going to just discuss this in a graph. I wanted to look at this graph and see how the pressure is changing and how this has been labeled. Mitral valve closes here, aortic valve opens here. Why? Because this is the line for the aorta, which is the pressure for the aorta, and then you suddenly see it rising, and then it separates here. So the aortic valve closes here. These are the main points you have to remember in these graphs. And here, of course, the mitral valve is the bicuspid valve or the atrioventricular valve. It's also called the bicuspid valve. So the bicuspid valve closes at this point, and this is when the pressure starts to rise, and the pressure starts to rise in the ventricle, and this is the pressure of the ventricle rising and then coming down. I also want you to keep this graph in mind and look at all these and look at one, because you're going to be questioned this a lot in this. There's going to be a graph on this. So this is 1, this is 2A, and then I wanted to look at the diagram of 2A, and then I wanted to look at 2B and the diagram of 2B, and then I wanted to look at this. So please download this diagram. It's, you can just type in cardiac cycle and you can see this in a number of on the Google search, and then look at this and look at this carefully and look at the different parts of the graph and understand it is a very good graph if you need to understand this this cardiac cycle. I'll just rub it off so then you can then save it all. And question 16, what are the products of aerobic respiration in a muscle? Aerobic respiration, not anaerobic, but they confused you by saying muscle and then. So it's water, carbon dioxide, and heat. This is normal respiration. Glucose plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide, water, and heat. So this was a very, very simple question, but it was confusing because somebody might have read it as anaerobic and then would have come up with lactic acid and all that rubbish. Then we come on to question number 17, which is discussed again in the exam report. And the question is very taxing for a number of candidates. Candidates could arrive at the correct answer either by realizing that 3 of the given experimental procedures were necessary for the maintenance of anaerobic conditions, or by realizing that the indicator liquid in the tube will move to the right during the experiment. So it must be near to the left hand edge of the tube at the beginning of the experiment. Now, I'll just explain that to you all. Now, basically, you were confused. I've been getting students asking me this on WhatsApp as well. Basically, what confused you, you said yeast suspension in sugar solution. Fine. The diagram shows the apparatus that can be used to measure the rate of anaerobic respiration. So you needed some sort of a thing here, an oil layer on top of this. But when this was going to respire, it was going to push this colored liquid to this side. Why? Because the carbon dioxide which was being produced inside would be at a higher pressure, so that would come out and that would go in here, and that would push this liquid to the right. And this is what you all did not understand. So this colored liquid would move to the right, being pushed by the carbon dioxide. This is something which you did not understand, and this is why you made these mistakes in this. So which precautions must be taken during the setting up of the apparatus? It was S. The yeast suspension must be made with boiled and cool water because we were studying anaerobic respiration. And then P, a layer of oil must be poured over the surface of the yeast suspension. That I told you here, oil here, so that no oxygen from the air would enter. And it was Q, the clip must not be closed until the yeast suspension has had time to reach room temperature. You see, the colored liquid must be near the right side. That was the wrong thing. This was not correct. R was wrong. So all these three had R. And that was the one that you had to pick up, that was the wrong one. So it was very easy if you knew which one was the wrong one. All these three had R, and R was wrong. So the only correct answer was D. Please look at this diagram again and understand this. We were studying anaerobic respiration in yeast. So basically the carbon dioxide was going to move this colored liquid to the right. The carbon dioxide would escape it because it would be at a higher pressure, and it would escape it and it would move it to the right. Then coming on to question number 18, what happens to the volume of the thorax and the air pressure in the lungs during breathing out? Volume of the thorax will decrease and air pressure in the lungs will increase. That's why air would be moving out of the lung sources during breathing out, during exhaling. So 19, the diagram shows the human urinary system. What are the correct labels? 1 was the kidney, 2 was the ureter, 3 was the bladder, and 4 was the urethra. I'm sure everybody knows that. That wasn't a very difficult question. Then coming on to question number 20, which part of the brain controls body temperature, hypothalamus, thermoregulation, and osmoregulation? Then 21, what is the role of motor neurons in reflex action? They carry nerve impulses from the central nervous system to an effector, and that effector can either be a muscle or a gland. I can change this question and I can give it not an effector, I can say muscle and gland, and you are going to have to give that as the correct answer. Connecting a receptor to the central nervous system, know that sensory neuron, forming a synapse with a sensory neuron, that could be possible, but it is role is not that in a reflex action. And transferring energy from the cells, that's rubbish. So we end the video here, and best of luck and thank you very much.